So to continue your reading on page 135 to 140, we're going to go over location. And so we talked a little bit about how you can name a place, right? How you can give it a toponym, and that's one way you can locate something. Today we're going to talk about site versus situation. But before we do that, we need to go over the idea of absolute location or relative location. So when we're talking about absolute location, we're looking at like an exact place on a map or an exact place on the surface of the earth. So that's when you're going to be using GPS coordinates. So when you put in an address and your GPS on your phone takes you there, that's an absolute location. Or if you're using the grid on the map, the lines of latitude and longitude, that would be an absolute location. Relative location is when you describe where something is. So if you were giving directions to your house to your friend, you might say like, "Oh, I live by the mall." Like that would be a relative location. Where is Boynton Beach? It's in South Florida. It's north of Miami. So when we talk about site, we're talking about the physical character of a place. So we're talking about climate, water sources, topography, soil, vegetation, latitude, elevation. So if I was talking about Florida, I would say Florida is at sea level. Florida is subtropical. Florida has lots of salt water, but its fresh water and its aquifers is being depleted. We have sandy soil. We are a very flat part of the world. And its situation would be its location relative to something else. So Florida borders the Atlantic Ocean. Florida also borders the Gulf of Mexico. Florida is south of Georgia. Florida is also southeast of Alabama. So when you look at a map or a globe, you see your lines of latitude and lines of longitude. For latitude, they're the ones that go across, right? They're horizontal lines. And I keep that straight when I think about it because I think about latitude like being flat across, like latitude, latitude. I don't know if that makes sense to you. And then longitude goes, north to south. And you really can use these just like you would use the points on a graph, like in math class, to find the absolute location of a place. So you can reference these places by speaking about how, like, Colorado is 40 degrees north latitude and 105 degrees west longitude. When you write out latitude and longitude, you should do north and south first, and then east and west. So when we're looking at how we distribute places, how we use places, we're also going to look at space. How do we arrange things? So we know that space is the physical gap or interval between two objects, or like the relationship between where something is on the map and then where it is in the real world, right? And so when we're getting back into thinking about space again, we also think about the arrangement of people and the arrangement of their activities. So when we look at space, we don't just look at where it is located. We also need to look at how things are distributed because we're looking for patterns. Remember, we are going to definitely use lots of maps, and there's definitely countries and regions of the world that you're going to have to be familiar with because they come up over and over and over again. But the point of human geography is to really look for these spatial patterns, not memorize, map after map after map. So when we're looking at space, we're looking at density, and that's how many times something shows up. So when you're looking at density of something, you're going to see the number divided by the land area. So usually it'll be like people per square mile, or how many Starbucks per square mile. The next thing we look at is concentration, and concentration is how much something is spread over the surface. So if it's close together, it's going to be clustered, and if it's far apart, it'll be dispersed. So I would say like Palm Beach County has a pretty high density of Starbucks. However, there is not one near my house. So they are clustered together in places where I don't live. And then the last way you can distribute something within space is a pattern. And so sometimes things are lined up in a geometric arrangement. So I think about like when they build houses in a neighborhood, right? Or how they put a lot of roads on like a grid line so you can find them. So some kind of pattern will be established. So if you look at this first picture, you can see that you can mark its density. And it has a lower density of homes than either of these two, right? So both of these have a higher density because there's more houses in the same amount of land area. This is a fairly concentrated area, and the houses are arranged at a regular interval. Now look at these two pictures here. They have the same density, so there's the same number of houses and the same amount of land area. However, this one has a higher concentration, right? They're clustered together. Well, they're spread out more. So these guys, the houses are clustered together more, and these guys are more dispersed. So here you're going to see them clustered together more. So you've got more open space, and the houses are closer together. And here they're a little more dispersed. Same thing here. You can look at the clustering of, look at baseball teams, the American League versus the National League. And you can see here that these teams are all clustered together in the northeastern part of the United States in 1952. So from New England up to the beginning of the Midwest. And that today, when you look at baseball teams, they are more widely dispersed across the country. Here you're seeing an example of geographic patterns. So here you've got some patterns that are set up. And so these are like major grid lines. And so when you're building like a major highway or you're building a neighborhood, you're going to see the grid lines established. When you start to move something further away from you, you're going to start to interact with them less. And we call that distance decay. So the further apart you are from something, the less likely you are to interact with it. And this used to be a way bigger deal, right? So this was a bigger deal before we had things like the internet and cell phones and even like a regular phone, even television reduced distance decay. When we got airplanes, right, people started to fly, that reduced distance decay. When you had to get like on a giant boat and it would take, a month to cross the Atlantic Ocean, like things didn't travel that fast. Now you could send something if you needed to within a day from Europe. So we've reduced our distance decay. So the more electronic communications that we have, the less distance decay that we have. So it's removing those barriers. And we'll go over distance decay a little bit more in class. I know that your book kind of talks about like friction of distance and Tobler's law, and we'll go over that in class together. So that won't be on your quiz. So when we're talking about access to technology, you're going to see areas that we refer to as the global core. So that would be North America, Western Europe, Japan, or highly developed countries. And then on the peripheral of that global core, you have the countries that are in Africa, countries in Asia, and countries in Latin America. And so you're going to have greater access to technology per person in North America, Western Europe, and Japan than you would in any of these peripheral areas. However, the more technology we have, the easier it is for everyone in the world to get. And that is it for this section of notes. We'll be talking about diffusion over the weekend.